We're going to go live to Missouri because the family of the unarmed black teenager Michael Brown are giving a news conference. They are just getting ready to start that news conference now. We are expecting several members of Michael Brown's family to be there, along with their lawyer and some of the other officials involved. Let's have a listen to what's going on.
All right, good morning. I am Pastor Tommy Pearson, pastor of the church here, and I'm also state representative of the 66th District in North County. We welcome you here today, and we thank you all for your for coming. And now we're going to get down to the business at hand. We're going to introduce now Attorney Crump.
Thank you so much, Pastor Pearson, for allowing us to have this press conference, this important press conference here in your church. I'm Attorney Benjamin Crump. I have the honor of serving as the lead counsel along with co-counsels Anthony Gray and Darrell Parks on behalf of the family of Michael Brown Jr. We also have present with us one of the highly respected, one of the most renowned forensic pathologists living today, Dr. Michael Biden, who we retain to be the family's pathologist to conduct an independent autopsy on their behalf. With him, who assisted him, is Professor Sean Parcells. They will be addressing you momentarily. The Brown family wanted to have this autopsy performed on their behalf because they did not know whether the federal officials were going to conduct their own independent autopsy, and they did not want to be left having to rely on the autopsy done by the St. Louis law enforcement agencies, the same individuals they feel are responsible for executing their son in broad daylight. So therefore, that is why they begged and pleaded to have an independent autopsy done. The attorneys here, we know too well, if you don't have your own autopsy and you have to depend completely on the police department autopsy, that's not a good thing. But even our clients understood that wasn't a good thing, that they could not trust what was going to be put in the reports about the tragic execution of their child. Secondly, I want to stress very clearly that this is only a preliminary report. Very preliminary. It answered questions, and Dr. Biden and Professor Parcells will get to elaborate, but it answered just basic questions. The number of shots, which was always a question that not only the family, the citizens of Ferguson, but people all over the country who had this colorblind curiosity to know what happened wanted to know. And that question was answered partly, and as Dr. Biden has opined and stated in the interview that was released, that it could have been answered on day one if you were really trying to have transparency be the objective. But what we now know from Dr. Biden and Professor Parcells' preliminary, very preliminary autopsy is at least six shots. Could be more, but at least six. They will have to consort with the other medical examiners who did the first autopsy. And Dr. Biden will explain to you why that's so very, very important, doing thousands and thousands of autopsies, as he explains. You want all the information you can get. This only tells part of the story. You know, also the clothes have to be recovered that will talk about whether there's any residue on them and so forth. He explains as only he can explain. You know, you want to talk about what was recovered in the x-rays, and most importantly, the witness accounts, the eyewitness accounts, which is so very important into bringing the full story together. And what does this preliminary autopsy tell us? It verifies that the witness accounts were true, that he was shot multiple times. And it's going to be one of those things that we have to get all the witness statements out and look at all the autopsies, all the evidence to put this picture together. But his family knows that the witnesses, what they were telling them about him being shot multiple times in broad daylight was accurate. And you all have reported on many of the witness accounts when they said his hands was up, that is in there. When they talk about the ways it happened, it's in there. And so we have to go from this point with this preliminary autopsy and try to get all the information so we can get the answers that not only the family wants, but Ferguson wants and the country wants. His mother and father and their family, they had just a few questions for Dr. Biden, and that is, the first question was, how many times was he shot? And so that question was answered, at least initially. As Dr. Biden met with the mother, she had the lingering question, as any mother would have, was my child in pain? And Dr. Biden shared with her, in his opinion, he did not suffer. And then lastly, his mother wanted to ask the question that Dr. Biden nor any of the lawyers could answer. What else do we need to give them to arrest the killer of my child? At this time, we will have Attorney Darrell Parks address you, and then Attorney Gray will address you, and then we will have Dr. Biden and Professor Parcells come and try to give all of us a little lesson on pathology. Thank you, Attorney Parks.
Thank you. In a situation like this, facts become very important, evidence becomes very important, and it's so important that the facts in this case really get out. This case has suffered from a lack of transparency of the, I'm actually going to get ready, I'm going to hold it up and show them something. And you heard Attorney Crump say there was multiple shots. There are two shots that I want to focus on for my purpose right here today, because they become important because they show that the direction of the bullet was in a back to front direction. The first one is what we call the kill shot, and the one that when Attorney Crump was speaking that he wouldn't have suffered from is right here. At the apex of his head, there was a very, very severe and clear injury. At the apex, the very top, that went from a back to front position. Also, there's a second shot to the head that you've heard us speak about. That shot is here. There's a little dot on the diagram that you see right by his hairline. That bullet went in there and came out near the eye area. That's very important because it shows a back to front for both of those. And it supports what the witnesses said about him trying to surrender to the officer. And his head was in a downward position, it had to be, for what had happened. Those type of facts are clear. And we believe that given those kind of facts, this officer should have been arrested. Those things speak for themselves. Why would he be shot in the very top of his head? 6'4" man. Makes no sense. And so that's what we have, and that's why we believe that those two things alone are ample evidence for this officer to be arrested.
Good morning, everyone. I want to continue the call and the plea for those that are reporting, for those that are investigating this case, to remain fair, to remain balanced, and to look at this case for what it is. I can see that there is a very disturbing divide that's developing in our community, and this is not what we initially came to the community and called for. Our call was for fairness, it was for transparency. We had to have this autopsy so we can have information at our fingertips that we can then explain to those that have called me on multiple occasions, and I have not been able to say a word, and I have not spoken to anybody about what I knew personally. So this is this opportunity to get this information out. One thing that I will address from a factual standpoint, I saw a news report this morning, and one of the, I'm not sure if he was an officer or not, but one person reported that the events last night may have been spurred by or triggered by the release of this autopsy. Let me just tell you for a fact that this autopsy came out 2 hours later after the law enforcement authorities made a decision to converge on that crowd. And so if they want to make a connection between the release of this information and what happened last night, that connection is misplaced. Thank you so much.
And now we will call Dr. Michael Biden and Professor Sean Parcells to discuss about their preliminary autopsy findings.
Right. Sorry. Thank you, Ben. We're here as forensic scientists. We're looking for information that is from the autopsy and other scientific studies that will allow us to eventually reach final conclusions. But the question that is asked to me most commonly in these types of situations, when somebody dies after an encounter with police, anywhere in this country, everywhere in other countries too, when it's predictable that there may be community concerns and that the parents of the decedent doesn't trust the government because it's the government that's caused the death, and they request a second autopsy, independent autopsy, and this is not uncommon. A third is very uncommon. That's going to happen today or tomorrow from the federal government, I understand. So that, and the reason for it is, as Mr. Crump has indicated, is that when there isn't transparency. I was medical examiner and chief medical examiner in New York City for some 25 years as I worked there. We had a number of these encounters. And what we found in New York City was that the sooner the information goes out, the sooner the family is talked to. The family has a right to know how their loved one died. This calms community and family concerns over cover-up or not getting told the truth.